Hello and welcome to another episode of Script to Screen. I'm your host, Mark Bauer. This is a talk show dedicated to local writers and filmmakers of the Iowa City area. Today I'm joined by Erin Marshall, who studies writing at the university. So welcome, Erin.
Thank you.
So what did you come to the university looking to study specifically?
Sure. So the reason I actually chose Iowa is because of the creative writing program. It is like a master's program, but I figured the undergrad program would also be good. So I came from my hometown in Minnesota to Iowa here to study creative writing and be an English major.
What genre would you say you are more comfortable working with, or what would you say is your medium?
Yeah, so when I first got here, I just kind of like everyone else presumed that I would want to do fiction writing. I feel like a lot of people think that they want to do that. But then I'd always loved acting and theater, so I started taking classes in playwriting, and then my interest blossomed from there, and now I mostly do playwriting, or it's my genre of choice, I guess.
So you mentioned that you grew up doing plays or watching plays. How far back would you say that goes? Was it high school, or was it even younger than that?
Yeah, it was a little younger than that, kind of like in junior high, like 7th, 8th grade is kind of when I started getting interested, but I didn't really do anything too big until I got to high school.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And you had probably seen a few plays when you were younger.
Oh yeah, definitely. I remember once my parents took us to see Les Miserables in Minneapolis, and that was kind of one of my first exposures to like professional theater that I can remember, and I really loved it. It was so cool.
And then you mentioned that you also did some acting.
Yeah.
Now, was that more in the lead roles? Were you getting more ensemble parts, or?
It kind of varied. I went to a really small high school.
Okay.
And so the group of people that did theater was kind of like the same. Like you just kind of went to all these plays and were in the same place with the same people. So it just kind of varied depending on like what open roles there were. Let's see. I was once a fairy in like this version of Sleeping Beauty, like a lead fairy. But then I was also in a version of 12 Angry Jurors, or 12 Angry Men, but they changed it to jurors because they were women.
Yeah.
And that was really fun too. So it kind of varied.
Did they let you write plays back then, or was it all pre-written material that you guys were acting out?
Yeah, it was all pre-written. I had never actually written a play really until I got to college. For some reason, my mind just didn't like put the two and two together that I could combine my love of writing with my love of theater until I got to college. So, yeah.
And you're more exposed to students that are putting on plays. They got like the New Writers Festival and the 10-minute play festival and things like that.
Exactly. That was like my first exposure to having my play like put up, I guess, so to speak. At Iowa was the 10-minute play festival my sophomore year, so 2013, I think. And one of my plays was in that. And that was so cool to see like these characters that I'd just written about on the page, but I actually got to see them come to life. And like it was a play about women in about 1910, so they were wearing like 1910 clothes, and it was so awesome. It was really cool.
So what was that process like? Did you have it pre-written and then you heard about the festival and thought, well, I'll submit this and see what happens?
Yeah, that's pretty much exactly what happened. Like, I took my first playwriting class in the spring of my sophomore year, and then our teacher was like, well, next year at this time, like, they're calling for 10-minute play scripts for the 10-minute play festival. And so the next year, my sophomore year, I submitted it in the fall, and then it got selected, and then we just kind of went from there. And like, I got to have my own director, and it was kind of hard to find a director, but then we actually ended up getting really lucky. I did, I guess, and finding a director that like works professionally. Like she works at Riverside Theater here in town. And then I got to like sit in on auditions and help cast my own play, and then like sit in on actual rehearsals. So I kind of saw the thing from start to finish.
Did you have quite a hand in everything then? Were you able to make decisions working with the director, or was it kind of their kind of taking over?
Mm-hmm.
you've done, or was it kind of a collaborative process?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I'd say it was both. Like it was collaborative because she really got to know me and like we sat down and I don't know, had coffee or whatever and really talked about who these characters were and like what the theme of my play was and things like that. But then I also just kind of like gave her a little room, I guess, to like do her director thing because
Right.
I'm not a director and I think it's a lot different than writing. Directing is a lot different than writing. And so she kind of made some decisions, but then of course asked me first and I was like, sure, yeah, seems cool.
I imagine it's a whole different process of like, we've got to get the director, now we've got to get the cast, now let's worry about costumes and all that. Like it's kind of a big ordeal, even though it's a 10-minute play, you go through all the motions.
Totally. Yeah, I'd never really been on that side of things before. I'd just been like, I'm going to walk in and audition for this play in high school. And then either I get it or I don't. And then someone else gives me the costume and I just do what the director says. So it was a whole new like world to explore in theater. And I think theater in general is such a collaborative effort because like you said, you have like the director and the writer and the costumes and the lighting and everything like that. So it was cool to get to see that for the first time.
And then what was it like watching your play done in front of you? Like that feeling of, you know, when you're writing a novel or a short story, people read it later and then tell you what you think. But in a theater, you're hearing the laughter if it's a comedy, or you know, you're seeing people interested if it's a drama. So what's that like, having that immediate audience there?
Oh my gosh, so nerve-wracking.
Yeah.
I was so nervous. And the way the festival works is like it's on Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. So I got to see it 4 different times. But on Thursday, the first day, I remember being so scared. But it was really cool. And you know, I was sitting next to my friend, and so she was able to tell me what she thought, like right after the show. But I don't know. It was very exactly like what you said. Like people were seeing it, and nothing could be changed at this point.
Yeah.
So it was scary, but really fulfilling, I guess, too.
So I talked to you earlier, and you said that you wrote a play for your thesis.
I did.
Do you want to talk about that a little more?
Yeah. So the thesis process is really time-consuming and grueling, but also cool. So it starts in the fall, and like by that time I was like, I want to write a play for my senior thesis, a full-length play. And so then I kind of started experimenting with what I wanted to write about. And my mom has always traveled for her job, and so to all the places that she's been, she would always send me a postcard in the mail. And so I literally have like hundreds of postcards just from my mom. And I was like, that would be a really cool like object to have in a play, just have postcards everywhere. So I started experimenting with the idea of postcards, and so many rewrites and like workshops and advice from people. And so it gradually kind of changed into like talking about memories and also focusing on postcards, but like how different people, even in a family, which is what my play is about, it's about a family, how they like remember different memories differently, if that makes sense at all.
Sure.
So that's kind of the general concept of the play.
And this is a long, like, feature, or not feature, but like full-length play, I guess.
Yep. It's, I think like, I told you earlier, like 80 pages, 85, somewhere between like 75 and 85.
Had you done a longer play before, or was it all just shorter works?
It was mostly like shorter works. I'd done 10-minute plays and then like a 1-act, which was about 30-ish pages. And I'd tried to do a full length one other time, and I don't know, I didn't feel as great about it as I wished I would have, but I did get to like 60 or 70 pages, so yeah.
You gotta really stay interested in the characters and the plot.
Exactly.
Because it's like, you know, if you don't care, how would you expect someone else to watch this and
yeah.
care? So.
And if you stop caring, it shows in your writing.
Sure.
I mean, yeah, the characters don't seem as intriguing, I guess.
Unfortunately, that's happened to me
Really?
many times, yeah, with screenwriting classes. Or, you know, it's that thing where once I get stuck, it's like, oh, I'll just write this other movie
Yeah,
for like 5 pages, and then I'm like, well, I don't like this one either.
And then you have like 6 going at once,
Yeah.
and you're like, oh, I should probably finish one of these, but I just don't want to. totally been there.
So let's talk about your revision process a little bit. Do you have
Yeah.
mostly peers read it, or do you go to instructors? How does that work?
Yeah, so for the thesis in the fall semester, all the people writing a thesis had to take this class, and it was just kind of like a workshop-based class. So it was peers, but also a professor, obviously, leading it. And then I also had a thesis advisor, who is another professor. She's an English professor in the English department, but she like primarily focuses on theater, but like not really playwriting, just like reading theater from like a literary perspective.
Oh, okay.
If that makes sense. So basically, I did like the revisions that my classmates would suggest and that my professor would suggest, and also that my thesis advisor would suggest. I would meet with her like on a pretty regular basis. And then we had to turn in a final kind of draft in December, make more revisions, and then the final draft was just due, well, actually it's due tomorrow. And so I'm done.
Oh,
though.
well, that's
Yeah.
good. You got it all
Yes,
together then.
I do. I
All right.
do.
You're
It
not
feels
just
good.
slacking off on somebody's TV show.
No,
That's good.
I'm not lying.
So how do you feel about the workshopping process? Because that can be kind of nerve-wracking in itself. You're having people your age, like 20 of them, all reading your work, and some tell you really what they think, and that's harsh. And do you feel like that really helps you? It's more beneficial than it is anything else, or?
Yeah, I've been in some pretty, to be honest, I've been in some pretty like bad workshops
Yeah.
where people have said some kind of mean things, and it's like, okay, whatever. But no, this past semester in the fall, it was a really good workshop class. It was kind of interesting to hear their feedback because they were all like doing literary more theses, and like playwriting is different than analyzing a book. So their feedback was like interesting and not as theatrical based, but it was still really, really invaluable, and I appreciate their help.
Yeah, I find that the best workshops are the ones that people have things to say, because I've had one workshop where it was a bunch of freshmen and it's their first workshop, so they're not so critical yet. And I would get a lot of, oh, this was really great, don't change a thing. But then I was like, this is a first draft if you really think about it.
Yeah, yeah, totally. And people are just like, yeah, I loved it. That's it.
Yeah.
It's like, come on, tell me what you really think. If you hated it, just tell me. But say it nicely, please.
Yeah, and pick something for me to work on. It's
Yeah.
not just, oh, I didn't like it. Well, what am I supposed to do with that?
Yeah, that's so like, such an elementary attitude. Like, I feel like people said that in 8th grade. Like, oh, I don't like it.
Yeah.
Fix it. You're like, thanks, not.
So you've taken other writing classes here. I know you've taken like a nonfiction class. So how do you feel about that versus playwriting or fiction writing?
So fiction writing for me is like really hard for some reason. And I know plays are kind of fiction in a way. But for some reason in my mind, like when I think of a story, I think of it in dialogue, not in descriptions. But I like nonfiction a lot too. I like writing about my own life. It's kind of scary to like present that in workshop. I think that's the scariest kind of workshop to be in, is a nonfiction one. But yeah, I like it though.
I found that nonfiction workshops are a bit different from fiction workshops, because fiction workshops you can be a little more brutal, be like, I don't really care for this character, whereas in a nonfiction class, this really happened to somebody, this is their life story, so the feedback tends to be more about how you're writing the story versus the story itself. Is that something you've come across too?
I definitely think so. And like, it's interesting to sit in on a nonfiction workshop. Like in the one that I took, I wrote this story about myself and like coming to the University of Iowa, and it was like a big change for me. And people are like, well, the narrator kind of seems a little bit naive or like kind of wimpy or whatever. And they're like, but I'm so sorry, Erin, I still love you. I'm like, yeah, oh well. At least you're being honest. But you know they kind of feel bad because it is about you.
So then would you work on your voice a little bit to change it?
Yeah, and kind of like broaden the perspective of the narrator, which is me.
Yeah, kind of almost putting on a persona as you're writing a bit.
Yeah, you kind of have to think outside of your own head and outside of your own box when writing nonfiction.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned a little bit that you worked with the youth writing program or project here.
Yeah.
So what
Yeah.
did you do for that?
Yeah, I child wrangle for them. Just
Yeah.
kidding. Yes, the Iowa Youth Writing Project. And basically I just volunteer with kids in the community and like encourage them to be creative and literary. So like every week I go to this place called Pheasant Ridge. It's a community center in Iowa City. And the kids aren't really, some of them are, but some of them aren't old enough to like write like full sentences. They can barely like spell because they're so little. But yeah, even just like drawing pictures and kind of encouraging them to be creative and like, I don't know, think about reading books more and like things like that.
Mm. So would you specifically work with playwriting with any of them or try to push that on them a little bit? Because I'm sure, because you said that you didn't realize, oh, I could write plays. I'm sure they might not know that either.
Yeah.
So did you try to put that in their head a bit?
I wish I had. The kids that I worked with were like too little.
Oh, right.
I don't know. It was like they couldn't even write a story.
Mm-hmm.
They just drew pictures of like rainbows and bunnies or something like that. But I volunteered at a couple high schools too, and I've done one playwriting workshop there, and it was really cool because I feel like playwriting as a genre isn't as exposed to like youth today. At least it wasn't for me. And if I had learned about it earlier, I think, I don't know, who knows where I'd be.
Yeah.
I could have like blossomed my interest even earlier.
Do you have a specific genre in terms of like comedy versus drama that you like to write?
Yeah, I'd say I'm more drama based. I can't really write comedy.
Yeah.
I like watching comedy and I don't know. I just can't write it for some reason on the page. And a lot of times I do write like historical based plays actually. I talked earlier about my like 1910s kind of one, and I've written another one-act play that it's not specifically set in like the 50s, 60s, but that's kind of like the era, like the vibe that you get from the characters, and that's what was in my head when I wrote it. So I'm interested in historical fiction actually.
Do you usually, for those, start with the setting in terms of like the time period or the place where it's taking place, or where does the idea usually come from for those?
Yeah, I think it mostly just kind of starts with like being interested in a specific time period in history, or like what was happening at that time period or how things are viewed, and then it kind of develops from there into the story that I want to tell.
And how do you usually pick your characters for that? Because you said you wrote a family drama.
Yeah.
Do you usually start with just the one character and then build others around them?
Yeah, I do actually. And for some reason, I've like found it really hard to write male characters. I don't know why. Maybe it's because I am a female and like I just am kind of writing about myself in a way. But yeah, it definitely kind of builds around one or maybe two central characters, and then kind of like a conflict between them, and then grows from there.
So just one thing that happened to me was I studied abroad in Ireland.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Oh, did you do the like
Irish writing
writers?
program?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that sounds so awesome.
Yeah, it was great. And we wrote a play. Everyone wrote a play at the end. It was just like 600 words, so a tiny play. And one thing that we noticed was we were asked how many of us wrote female characters, and only about a third of the people had one female character in their play. Is that something that you've seen, is maybe a lack of female characters in plays, or was that just maybe something weird that happened to us?
Maybe it was. Like, honestly, I feel like I've seen a lot of female characters in plays. I have noticed that like a lot of the traditional playwrights that we think of today are men. So I think like female playwrights in general are like growing, or like more females are trying to kind of break into the industry, which is really awesome. But yeah, that's so kind of bizarre.
Yeah.
Who knows? Maybe it was just some random
It
thing.
could have been. So what is it maybe difficult coming in as a woman playwright, or is it more welcome? Is it more diverse here at this university where there's maybe more of a mix of?
Yeah, I definitely think there's a mix. I'm thinking of like all my friends that have done playwriting before, and a lot of them are theater students, not as many English students for some reason. But I'd say there's definitely a mix, and I went to a playwriting festival in Atlanta last summer around this time actually, and yeah, there were a mix of men and women and like just diversity as far as like, age, race, like pretty much everything, which is good.
Yeah, that's really good to hear because it's kind of a struggle in the film world. You know,
Really?
it's no real secret that film is a boys' club,
Yeah.
and we're
I
just
suppose.
kind of now getting around to addressing this.
Interesting.
So I don't know if you had any thoughts on
Yeah.
like just encouraging women to keep writing and get their voices out there.
They definitely should. I think women should break into every writing genre possible, and I feel like in the past it's been like a lot of fiction and maybe poetry, like, oh, women just like come up with their own like quiet stories or like cheesy poems or something, but like I think film and like playwriting, like screenwriting, theater writing, whatever, are really different and interesting genres, and I think everyone should try it out, regardless of who you are.
Are you looking to get back into acting at all, as well as writing?
Probably not. I wish. I don't feel like as much of an actress as I used to, but yeah. I like writing about it, but not actually doing it as much anymore.
Yeah, maybe now that you've seen the other side of things and being more in control, maybe you do like that a little better.
Yeah, I think I kind of do, and just being able to, I don't know, I can't even stress how cool it is to literally just like write something on the page and then see it like come to life. And in other genres, I don't think you get to do that unless, you know, a fiction book gets turned into a movie, which is happening a lot now.
Yeah.
But yeah, and like there's something about being in a theater too, as opposed to a movie, because like I could like reach out and touch the actors if I wanted to, which would be pretty bad. But I mean, if I wanted to disrupt things, I could.
You could bring your tomatoes to the show.
Yes, just start chucking them.
Yeah, that sounds like fun.
Yes, it does actually.
It's a bit of a cliche, but you know, you feel the energy of them and they feed off the energy of you. Is that because you've been a part of plays and you've had them written, so is that definitely a thing that happens there?
Yeah, I think the energy of like the audience definitely affects how the actors are doing. Like sometimes if the audience isn't laughing at the jokes, you know, you're not as amped up as an actor. And I also think that actors like feeding off each other too. Like if one of them's sick or not feeling well, then maybe the others aren't as like on top of their game, and you're all just kind of more subdued.
Sure. What do you hope to do now that you graduate? Are you're planning on moving to, was it Chicago?
Yeah, I'm moving to Chicago. I'm going to work at a place called Becker's Healthcare, and they are a healthcare media company, so I'm going to be writing articles about healthcare. But I do still want to stay involved in like the creative writing world. There's a thing called Chicago Dramatists, and so they're kind of like a service, I guess, like a guild or something like that for playwrights. So I want to see if I can get involved in that. It sounds kind of cool.
Do you know anybody there already? Or?
In Chicago, no. No, I'm just moving there. My best friend is going to be interning there, but living with her family, like in a suburb of Chicago. So I can see her, but I get to meet new friends.
Yeah, that's the way of looking at it.
Yeah, there we go.
Stay positive.
Exactly. Yeah, thank you. That gives me more courage.
Do you have any advice for anyone looking to get into writing? What would that be?
That's an awesome question. I feel like I should have come prepared with an answer. I guess just write a lot. Write every single day. And read a lot too. And read everything. Like read plays, read fiction, read nonfiction, read poetry, read really bad stuff, and read really good stuff. And also just like find a community of people to work with and like get their advice on things. And it's kind of hard to do outside of a college setting, I feel, but if you can, find people.
Yeah. And they could probably start, like if they're even younger, they could start just with their friends.
Yeah.
Make a play, put it on for the folks, you know.
Yeah, totally. who knows, maybe your high school or middle school would even like let you do something in front of people. That would be cool.
Yeah. Well, that's some sound advice, I think.
Oh, thank you.
And I want to thank you for being on the show.
Yeah, thank you. This was fun.
Oh, well, I'm glad.
Yay.
Well, thanks for watching this episode of Script to Screen. I'll be seeing you next time.